My name is Celia Davis. I'm 26 years old, and 3 years ago, I walked out on my family for good. Last month, my father was sentenced. What happened in between still feels unreal some days, but if you're expecting a clean break or a heroic speech, you're going to be disappointed. It started with something small, something stupid, something that finally made everything else impossible to ignore. At the time, I was living in Midland, Texas, oil country. Flat, dusty, loud, and hot for 9 months of the year. The kind of place where people either struck it rich or spent their lives scraping by, convincing themselves it was temporary. I was firmly in the second category. Still living in my parents' house, not because I wanted to, but because every attempt to leave had been quietly sabotaged. They charged me rent the day I turned 18, $350 a month. My mother framed it as preparing me for the real world. Funny how the real world never applied to my younger brother. Evan, 22, hadn't paid a dime. Never held a real job. He was in his fourth year of a 2-year business program at the community college, floating along on excuses and extensions. Our parents called him entrepreneurial. I called him what he was enabled. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was structural, built into the house like bad wiring. When Evan needed money, it appeared. When I needed help, there was always a reason it couldn't happen. Tight month. Unexpected expense. You're the responsible one, Celia. You'll figure it out. Responsible, the word they used when they didn't want to show up. I was the family workhorse, the fixer, the one who only mattered when something needed lifting, paying for, or covering up. My tools were shared without asking. My time was assumed to be flexible. My future was optional. Then I got an opportunity. Garrett Mechanical was taking applications for an HVAC apprenticeship, paid training, certifications. A real ladder, not a job, a path. I spent 2 weeks on that application. Got a reference from my warehouse supervisor, Dale, a man who'd spent 30 years in the trades before his back finally gave out. He coached me, loaned me his truck for the interview, treated my future like it mattered. The night before the interview, I overheard my parents talking. Evan needed another $800. Registration fees, extra costs. My mother said they'd pull from the education fund. Education fund. I stood there holding a hot iron, realizing I'd been lied to since I was 16. There had always been money, just not for me. By morning, I hadn't slept. I was up early, showered, dressed, rehearsing answers while trying not to get toast crumbs on my only decent shirt. The interview was at 11. I needed to leave by 10. Evan wandered into the kitchen around 9:30 wearing basketball shorts and entitlement. He poured himself cereal, the expensive kind, and sat scrolling on his phone. "I need you to drive me to Madison's place," he said. I checked the time. I can't. I've got an interview. He didn't look up, then reschedule. I've been waiting 3 months for this. I've been waiting to see my girlfriend. I said no. That was the moment everything cracked. Within minutes, my mother appeared, arms crossed, disappointment already loaded. Why couldn't I help my brother just this once? Why was I being difficult? I asked her when anyone had ever chosen me. She didn't answer. Then my father came home early. He found me in my room, documents laid out ready to go. He told me Evan's future mattered. Mine didn't. And when I reminded him of everything he'd taken from me, every chance quietly destroyed, he showed me exactly who he was. He slammed me into the wall. My mother watched. My brother smiled. Something went quiet inside me. I picked up my folder, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I had 40 minutes to make it to the most important interview of my life, with a bruise blooming on my face and nothing left to lose. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until I pulled into the gas station 3 miles from my parents' house and nearly missed the turn. The adrenaline that had carried me out the front door was fading fast, leaving behind a hollow ache in my chest and a pulse of pain along my cheekbone where I'd hit the wall. I sat there with the engine idling, staring through the windshield, trying to convince my body that I wasn't in danger anymore, that the shouting was over, that no one was going to burst through the door and drag me back. In the bathroom mirror, the mark on my face was impossible to ignore, a dark red line already deepening toward purple, spreading like ink under my skin. I touched it lightly and winced. My shirt was wrinkled where my father's hand had fisted the fabric. I looked like exactly what I was, someone who'd just escaped something violent. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Sent it to Dale with a single line, "If something happens to me, it was my father." He replied almost immediately, "You safe right now," on my way to the interview. There was a pause then. "Proud of you. Whatever happens, you did the right thing." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until my throat tightened. I splashed water on my face, straightened my shirt as best I could, ran damp fingers through my hair. There was no hiding the bruise. And for once, I wasn't going to try. I wasn't going to make myself smaller or quieter to make other people comfortable. If they asked, I'd tell the truth. If that cost me the opportunity, then at least I'd know I hadn't built my future on another lie. Garrett Mechanical sat on the east side of town, a corrugated metal building designed to survive West Texas heat and wind. Functional, unpretentious. The kind of place that cared more about what you could do than how polished you looked doing it. I arrived 12 minutes early, checked in with the receptionist, and took a seat in the waiting area. She glanced at my face, concern flickering across her expression. Rough morning. You could say that. A few minutes later, a man in his 50s stepped out and called my name. Barrel-chested, sun-weathered handshake like a vice. Ray Thornton, he said. Operations manager. The first thing his eyes went to was the bruise. He didn't comment on it right away, just gestured for me to follow him back. We sat down across from each other in a small office that smelled faintly of oil and coffee. So he said, finally leaning back in his chair, "You want to tell me what happened?" I could have lied. I'd had plenty of practice smoothing things over. But something in his tone told me he didn't want a story. He wanted the truth. My father threw me into a wall because I wouldn't cancel this interview to drive my brother to his girlfriend's house. Ray raised his eyebrows, then nodded slowly. "How far did you drive after that?" "About 10 miles. Stopped to fix my shirt." He made a sound that was half grunt, half laugh. "All right, let's talk." The interview wasn't flashy. No trick questions. He asked about my work history, why HVAC, what I wanted long term. I told him I was tired of jobs that went nowhere, that I wanted something I could build, something that couldn't be taken away from me just because someone else decided it mattered more. "Most people your age just want the paycheck," he said. "Don't want to hear about the grind." "I've been grinding my whole life," I said. "I just want it to count for something." When it was over, he didn't shake my hand right away. He studied me for a moment, then asked a question I hadn't expected. "You got a place to stay tonight?" The truth caught in my throat. I hadn't thought past the interview. Everything after that was a blank. "Not really," I admitted. "I'll figure something out." He picked up his phone, made a call, talked to someone named Chuck, asked about a spare room. When he hung up, he nodded. "Friend of mine runs an auto shop on 7th. He's got a room above the garage. Cot bathroom, nothing fancy, but it's safe. You can stay there while you get on your feet." I stared at him, stunned. I'd known this man for less than an hour, and he was offering me more security than my own parents ever had. "Thank you," I said quietly. He shrugged. "We look out for our own." I left that building with no promises yet, just a second interview scheduled and a place to sleep. But for the first time in years, the ground under my feet felt solid. That night, in a room above a garage that smelled like oil and dust, I slept deeper than I had in years. No footsteps overhead, no tension humming in the walls, just silence. In the morning, my phone was full of messages from my mother. I didn't open a single one. I woke up before my alarm the next morning, disoriented for a split second by the unfamiliar ceiling above me. The room was dim, lit only by a thin slice of early sunlight pushing through a dusty window that overlooked the alley. No voices, no doors slamming, no passive-aggressive comments drifting in from the kitchen, just the distant hum of traffic and the faint smell of motor oil rising from the shop below. It took me a moment to realize how tense I'd been for years, how my body had learned to sleep lightly, always half expecting confrontation. That morning, my shoulders finally unclenched. Then I checked my phone. 23 missed calls, all from my mother. A handful of texts layered with urgency that curdled into guilt the longer I stared at them. "Where are you?" "Your father didn't mean it. We need to talk like a family. You're overreacting, Celia. Come home." Home. The word felt foreign now, like something I used to believe in. I didn't respond. By mid-morning, Dale showed up at the shop like he said he would, leaning against his truck coffee in hand, eyes sharp in that quiet, protective way of his. He didn't ask me to explain everything, just nodded toward the passenger seat. "You ready?" I was, or at least I was ready enough. The drive back to my parents' house was silent. The closer we got, the heavier my chest felt, not with fear, but with something closer to grief. 26 years of my life lived inside that place. 26 years of trying to earn something that was never going to be given. My mother was waiting on the porch when we pulled up. She froze when she saw Dale step out of the truck behind me. Her face tightened, not with relief, but irritation. Witnesses had never been part of her plan. "You didn't need to bring anyone," she said quickly. "We're family. We can talk about this in private. I walked past her without answering. Inside, the house looked exactly the same. Same couch, same framed family photos that never quite included me the way they included Evan. Same faint smell of cleaning spray, masking old resentment. I moved through it like a stranger heading straight for my room. Packing was faster than I expected. Everything I owned fit into a few boxes and a duffel bag, clothes, my laptop, books, a handful of tools I'd bought myself. The sum total of my existence in that house. You don't accumulate much when you're treated like you're only passing through. When I opened the drawer where I kept my documents, my stomach dropped. The manila envelope was gone. My birth certificate, social security card, truck title, everything that proved I existed on paper. I turned back to my mother, who was hovering in the doorway. Where's my paperwork? She didn't hesitate. Your father put it somewhere safe. He'll give it back once you calm down. Calm down, like this was a tantrum, a phase. This is just temporary, she added softly. You'll come home. Family always comes back. Something in her certainty chilled me more than the threat itself. She truly believed I'd return, that I'd fold, that they could hold my identity hostage until I remembered my place. I'll get replacements, I said. Her expression faltered. Just for a second. She hadn't expected that. Evan showed up while we were loading the truck. He leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, watching like he was supervising hired help. So this is it, he said with a laugh. Running away, I closed the tailgate slowly and turned to face him. Dale shifted beside me, silent but ready. I've spent my entire life cleaning up after you, I said. Covering for you. Paying for you. This is my retirement. For once, Evan didn't have a comeback. We drove away without a scene. No shouting. No dramatic goodbye. In the side mirror, the house shrank until it was just another building on a street full of them, no longer the center of my world. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty and lighter than I'd ever been. The apprenticeship started on Monday at 6 a.m. No easing in, no grace period, just a steel door rolling open in the dark and a line of trucks already idling headlights cutting through the dust like they'd been waiting for me to show up and decide whether I belonged. I stood there in borrowed steel-toed boots, coffee burning my tongue, heart thudding harder than it should have. Not because I was scared of the work. I was scared of failing. Scared that if this fell apart, there would be nothing left to fall back on. No family couch, no emergency fund that magically existed for someone else. Just me. Ray paired me with Hector, a journeyman in his mid-30s, who looked like he'd been born holding a wrench. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself beyond his name, just glanced at me once and asked, You going to show up every day? Yes. Then we'll get along. That was it. Hector taught by example and punishment. You watched closely or you screwed up. You asked smart questions or you stayed quiet. He explained things once. Miss it, and that was on you. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't gentle either. He treated me like someone capable, and that alone felt strange. I wasn't used to being trusted with anything that mattered. The days were brutal. Up before dawn, crawling through attics thick with insulation and heat that made your vision swim, hauling units that felt heavier every week. Hands, raw muscles, screaming brain, overloaded with measurements, airflow calculations, wiring diagrams. At night, I collapsed onto the cot in the room above Chuck's garage, studied until my eyes blurred, then slept like someone who'd earned it. Chuck was exactly what Ray had promised. 60s, compact, covered in tattoos that hinted at a life that had never been easy. His laugh sounded like a rusted hinge, and his advice was usually blunt enough to sting. Eat more, he told me one night, tossing me a protein bar while I was reviewing notes at the counter. You're burning fuel like a busted engine. I lived on cheap groceries and gas station coffee, lost weight, gained calluses, learned fast. The storage room slowly became a real space, boxes stacked neatly, shelves made from scrap wood. A blanket hung over the window for privacy. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one could barge in. No one could take it away on a bad mood. After a few weeks, Chuck started letting me help close up the shop at night. In exchange, he taught me basic engine repair. When my truck finally died for good, I didn't panic. I borrowed tools. I learned. I fixed what I could. One evening, about a month in, Chuck handed me an envelope. Inside were keys and a title. What's this? I asked already, shaking my head. Old work van out back, he said. Runs fine. Ugly as hell, but reliable. I can't take this. He waved me off. You've been earning it. Call it a long-term loan. Pay it forward someday. That van became my lifeline. Transportation, backup shelter, proof that people could help without strings attached. My first paycheck from Garrett Mechanical hit that Friday. $846 after taxes. I stared at the number for a long time. It wasn't a lot, but it was clean, earned, mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving because someone allowed me to. I was surviving because I could. I didn't know yet that this was the calm before the real storm, that the worst betrayal was still buried, waiting patiently in black and white numbers, to show me exactly how deep my family's theft went. But standing there in Chuck's garage, grease on my hands, paycheck in my pocket, I let myself believe I'd finally escaped. The first hint that something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon that felt completely ordinary. I'd stopped by a local bank on my lunch break, still wearing my work boots, dust clinging to my jeans. I wanted to open a checking account, nothing fancy, somewhere to deposit my paycheck, so I wouldn't have to keep using prepaid cards and sketchy ATMs. I filled out the forms, handed over my ID, and waited while the teller typed. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "I'm not able to open an account for you today." I frowned. "Why?" She turned the screen slightly so I could see. "There are multiple negative reports associated with your Social Security number. Outstanding balances, delinquencies. We recommend pulling your credit report." The words didn't make sense at first. I'd never had a credit card, never taken out a loan, never financed anything bigger than a used phone. "That's not possible," I said. "I don't have credit." She gave me a sympathetic look. "According to this, you have quite a lot." I walked back to Chuck's garage in a fog. The shop noise felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. That night, sitting at the small counter with my laptop open, I requested my credit report. When it loaded, my hands went cold. 3 credit cards I'd never applied for, a car loan tied to a vehicle I'd never driven, store accounts at places I'd never shopped, subscriptions I didn't recognize, a personal line of credit nearly maxed out. Total debt $32,417. I stared at the number until it stopped looking real. The details told a story I didn't want to read. Gaming equipment purchases that matched Evan's setup down to the brands. Monthly payments to business software tied to my father's company. Gas station charges every few days. Consistent, routine, familiar. Even a gym membership. 3 years of it. I'd never set foot in a gym. The oldest account dated back to when I was 19. 7 years. 7 years of debt built in my name while I was being told there was no money for my education. 7 years of doors quietly closing because my credit was being drained behind my back. The final confirmation came buried in the statements. A shipping record for a $400 gaming headset, paid for with a card in my name, delivered to Evan at my parents' address. My brother hadn't just benefited. He'd known. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something worse, clarity. The kind that burns because it rewrites your entire past in an instant. Every no, every missed opportunity, every time I'd been told to be patient, to be responsible, to understand. I took the report to a legal aid clinic downtown the next day. The woman who met with me was named Lucy. 20 years of experience, calm voice, sharp eyes. She'd seen this before. Family identity theft is more common than people think, she said. It's also harder to prosecute. Most people don't want to press charges. I do. She paused, studied me, then nodded. Good, because once we file, this doesn't stay small. Your parents could face serious consequences. I know. And you're okay with that? I thought about the bruise on my face, the missing documents, the years stolen from me without a second thought. They already chose, I said. I'm just done covering for it. Lucy slid the paperwork across the desk. Then we start here. As I signed my name, my hands didn't shake. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. Once the report was filed, everything slowed down and then sped up all at once. At first, it was just paperwork. Endless forms, copies of statements, timelines. Lucy warned me this part would test my patience more than my anger. Investigations didn't move on emotion. They moved on evidence, dates, patterns, numbers that lined up too perfectly to ignore. Weeks passed. Then a month. I kept working, kept studying, kept showing up before dawn like nothing was happening, because in some ways nothing was. On the surface, my life looked stable for the first time in years. Inside, it felt like standing on a fault line, waiting for the ground to split. The fraud unit started by confirming what I already knew: those accounts were mine in name only. Signatures didn't match. Applications were traced back to IP addresses tied to my parents' house. Payments were made from accounts connected to my father's business. Every thread led back to the same place. Then they started pulling harder. What began as identity theft widened into something uglier. My father's landscaping business, something he'd always held up as proof of his sacrifice and success, was hemorrhaging money. Client deposits were being taken and never fully used for jobs. Partial work, delays, excuses. When clients started pushing back, he'd stall or disappear. The investigators found nearly $80,000 in client deposits that never went where they were supposed to. Then the IRS stepped in. Underreported income, payroll taxes avoided, workers paid under the table, personal expenses written off as business costs, penalties stacked on interest until the total climbed past $40,000. My mother's name was everywhere. Her signature, her email address, her login credentials tied to the accounts in my name. Month after month, she'd checked balances, made minimum payments, shuffled money around just enough to keep everything from collapsing too soon. She couldn't claim ignorance. She'd been managing it. The first real consequence landed 6 weeks after I filed the report. A detective showed up at one of my father's job sites while clients were there, asked questions, took notes, made it very clear this wasn't going away. In Midland, news like that spreads fast. Within a month, his business dried up. Phones stopped ringing. Contracts vanished. No one wanted to hire someone under investigation for fraud. The image he'd built for decades unraveled in silence. My mother tried to contact me. Calls, voicemails, emails that shifted between panic and accusation. She said I was destroying the family, that I didn't understand how hard things had been, that I was selfish for choosing money over blood. I didn't respond. Evan was more direct. He showed up at Chuck's garage one afternoon driving the expensive truck I'd watched him cruise around in for years. He didn't bother knocking. Just yelled my name like he still had the right. "I know she's here," he snapped at Chuck. "Tell her to come out and face me." Chuck stepped between him and the shop tire, iron in hand, expression flat. "You're going to leave. Now." Evan scoffed. "Or what?" Chuck didn't raise his voice. "Or you're going to have a very bad day." That was enough. Evan peeled out of the lot like a teenager pretending to be dangerous. Ray pulled me aside later that week. He'd heard things. Everyone had. "You holding up?" he asked. "I am," I said, and it surprised me to realize it was true. He nodded. "People who steal from their own kids don't stop unless someone stops them. You did the right thing." The guilt still tried to creep in at night. The old programming. Family is family. You don't air dirty laundry. You owe them. But every time doubt surfaced, I remembered the numbers, the forged signatures, the years of quiet theft. Blood didn't make them immune. It never had. The sentencing hearing took place 8 months after I filed the report. By then, the case had grown far beyond anything I'd imagined that first night staring at my credit report in Chuck's garage. What started as theft in my name had peeled back layers of lies that my parents had been building for years, long before I was old enough to understand what they were doing. Walking into the courthouse felt heavier than walking out of my parents' house ever had. I sat on a hard wooden bench near the back, hands folded, spine straight, forcing myself not to shrink. Across the room, my father sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't quite fit him anymore. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, like someone whose authority had finally evaporated once there were consequences attached to it. My mother sat a few rows behind him. She cried quietly into a tissue, shoulders shaking just enough to be noticed. Anyone who didn't know her might have felt sorry for her. I didn't. I'd seen that performance my whole life, tears deployed, when control slipped, emotion used like currency. Evan was there too, slouched in the gallery. Jaw-tight eyes, darting around the room like he couldn't believe he'd been dragged into something so inconvenient. He checked his phone until the judge warned him once, then twice. The prosecutor laid everything out methodically. No dramatics, just facts. $32,000 of fraudulent debt in my name alone. $15,000 more spread across other victims once investigators widened the scope. $80,000 in stolen client deposits. $40,000 in unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest. Emails between my parents discussing how to keep accounts active without raising red flags. Payment schedules. Forged signatures. Shipping confirmations with Evan's name on packages bought with my credit. When that last detail came up, I heard murmurs ripple through the room. My father's attorney tried to spin it. painted me as vindictive, claimed exaggeration, suggested I was unstable, that I'd misunderstood normal family finances. The judge didn't even flinch. I was asked to give a victim impact statement. I stood. My legs felt steady. My voice did too. I told the truth about the education fund that never existed for me, about the certifications I couldn't afford, about the truck sabotage, about years of being told to be responsible while my responsibility was being exploited behind my back. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just laid out the cost of what they'd done. By the time I sat down, the room was silent. The sentence came quickly after that. 4 years of state time for my father. Multiple counts, fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. No early release promises. Real consequences. My mother avoided prison, but only barely. Probation. Community service. Court-ordered restitution. Assets seized to repay what they owed. That meant the house. As they led my father away, he twisted around in his seat and looked at me one last time. "You happy now?" he asked. "You destroyed this family." I met his gaze without blinking. "No," I said. "You did. I just stopped hiding it." The house went into forced sale within months. When my mother couldn't keep up with anything on her own, foreclosure followed. The place I'd grown up in, gone, not because I walked away, but because the foundation had been rotten all along. Evan avoided charges. He'd been careful enough, or lucky enough, not to leave his name where it could stick. But his safety net vanished overnight. The truck was repossessed when payments stopped. The education fund dried up. Last I heard, he was working at a gas station and living with his girlfriend's family. Real entrepreneurial. I walked out of the courthouse that day lighter than I'd felt in years, not because I'd won, but because the truth was finally public. Karma didn't explode. It unfolded. Exactly on time. The legal consequences were loud, but the recovery was quiet. After the sentencing, life didn't suddenly turn cinematic or easy. There were no victory laps. No moment where everything snapped into place and stayed there. What I got instead was something far more unfamiliar to me: space. Space to fix what had been broken without someone actively breaking it again. Cleaning up my credit took almost a year. Accounts closed one by one. Disputes filed. Phone calls that lasted hours. Paperwork stacked so high it took over the small table in Chuck's garage. Some days I wanted to quit. Some days I stared at my credit score like it was a personal insult. But slowly, painfully, the numbers shifted. The fraud markers disappeared. The weight lifted in increments so small I didn't notice until one day I did. By then I wasn't living above the garage anymore. 8 months after I walked out of my parents' house, I signed the lease on a studio apartment. 1 room, thin walls, no dishwasher, but it was mine. Paid for with money, I earned credit I rebuilt, an effort nobody could take credit for but me. Work kept moving forward too. The apprenticeship turned into a permanent position. The certifications came one by one, long nights studying, long days sweating through crawl spaces, 2 years of grinding until the journeyman exam finally came back stamped pass. Ray promoted me to crew lead not long after. More responsibility, better pay, people asking me for answers. When Hector heard, he gave me a single nod. From him, that was a standing ovation. Dale showed up to my certification ceremony. So did Chuck. They stood in the back like proud uncles at a graduation, pretending not to care while caring deeply. We celebrated afterward at a taco truck Dale swore was the best in the Permian Basin. Paper plates, grease-stained napkins. Perfect. Chuck eventually sold me that old work van outright. Refused full price. Said I'd already paid for it in sweat equity. I still drive it. It still runs. Probably outlasts most things that weren't built on shortcuts. My mother reached out once about a year after everything settled. A handwritten letter. Careful language. Apologies that never quite landed anywhere specific. Lots of "we never meant for this, and I hope you can forgive us someday." I read it once. Then I threw it away. Some doors aren't meant to be reopened. I never heard from my father again. That was fine. I didn't need closure from someone who'd only ever seen me as a resource. Looking back, the line he threw at me that morning still echoes sometimes. His future matters. Yours never did. He was right about one thing. To him, my future never mattered. But the moment I walked out that door, it stopped being his decision. Walking away wasn't quitting. It was the first real choice I ever made for myself. If you're reading this and something feels familiar, if you're standing in a place where staying means slowly disappearing, know this: Leaving doesn't make you disloyal. Sometimes it's the only way to survive long enough to build a life that's actually yours. And once you do, no one gets to take it from you again.